the Iraqis, it was with the American bases that they were building. Concrete structures, incredibly permanent, designed to house thousands of soldiers for a long period of time.
The American people are being kept in the dark about all this. If it weren't for shows like yours and for a few others and the internet, people would never have a chance to learn the truth of this. What Cindy Sheehan has done is brought a human dimension to this. They said, look, people are getting killed, including my son. A lot of Iraqis are getting killed. Why don't we face up to whether this war makes any sense at all? Do we really want to have our young people sacrificed for what?
We don't know. We don't know what's going on. To tell you the truth, my kids don't know with the things that are involved in the decisions I make at my house. And that doesn't mean that they need to be involved in the decisions, because I know better than they know. It's because I'm more informed, and I'll give him that same benefit. You know, we did elect him.
Where have we lost our freedom?
All across the...
Where?
They're using Homeland Security against topless bars. They're using Homeland Security against toy store owners. They're using Homeland Security against pot dealers, and that's wrong. They're using Homeland Security, quote, against gang members. It's admitted. Are you familiar that the Gulf of Tonkin never happened? LBJ tapes have now been released. We went to war.
Well, you know, I just got to point out to Wolfowitz and Pearl and Feith and Abrams and Wormsers, you know, people like that, who this has been their plan, and it's about, you know, it's about imperialism. It's about abusing a nation's natural resources. It's about greed and power, and it's nothing about keeping America safe or freedom and democracy for the Iraqi people.
You know?
I believe that America, right from the start of the Bush administration, has been focused on the use of American military power in order to extend control by America of strategic areas in the world.
Now we have the Downing Street minutes, which show that as early as July 23, 2002, the head of British intelligence, just back from Washington, said to his prime minister, it's a done deal, the decision for war is inevitable, the war will be, quote, justified by the conjunction of terrorism and weapons of mass destruction, and intelligence and facts would be fixed around the policy of war. There's the proof that the intelligence, all this justification in quotes for the war, was a fraud from day one.
The Project for a New American Century, the think tank, with the report called Strengthening America's Defenses. This is frankly a demand for full spectrum dominance by the United States. I think the most chilling aspect of the Project for a New American Century document is this kind of transformation of our foreign policy, this kind of strengthening of America's defenses is a revolutionary change, and is not going to happen at all quickly, absent a new catalyst of massive proportions. For example, a new Pearl Harbor.
In Crawford, Texas, we found individuals who believe the weapons of mass destruction were found in Iraq.
No weapons of mass destruction were found.
Are you kidding me? Do you buy that?
Yes.
Of course there were mass. Of course there were.
David,
there were. Yeah.
This guy would make a great citizen in George Orwell's fictitious 1984.
If we took them all away, does that still mean that if he had the capability, would he still? See, that's in the mind.
Well, she's got an ad on TV that said he lied, my son died. You know,
he hasn't lied to nobody.
What did George Bush lie about?
He said he was going to protect this country.
Weapons of mass destruction. That
no matter what it took to keep the enemy out of our backyards. He never said there weren't going to be nobody killed. That's war.
I think they're saying that Bush lied about WMDs, not about troops were going to die.
But did he though? Those weapons were there.
The authoritarian powers of the state, which are available to government, is very dangerous. And I think we live in a state, we live in states, both the United States and the UK, where the powers to question, to call in evidence, to demand explanation, to hold to account those who are in control are gradually systematically being weakened. This is very dangerous in a democracy.
Now, Dick Cheney and John Bolton and others have been saying Iran poses an immediate danger. They could get a nuclear weapon before we know it. All the same things they said about Iraq. And so we have to do something about that now.
You know, he said the same thing about Iraq, and like you said, he was caught red-handed. It's proven to be lies. Why should we believe him about Iran?
I'm pleased to tell you, American people, that the National Intelligence Estimate just put out on Iran says that Iran cannot possibly have a nuclear weapon for 10 more years. Let me say that one more time. Iran can't be a nuclear power, weapons-wise, for 10 more years.
We have to look at whether our governments are creating enemies so that they can justify what they do. Of course, two of the biggest funders of American presidential campaigns are the oil industry and the arms industry. And it's in their interests that we invade places like Iraq.
We're going to let the Israelis, or we're going to do it ourselves, attack the nuclear facilities in Iran. Now, people say, that's crazy. That is absolutely crazy. I agree. The problem is, folks, the people running our policy toward Iraq and Iran were widely known in the 1980s when I was briefing the Vice President and others as the crazies, okay? The crazies. You come in on Monday morning and somebody would say, guess what the crazies did late Friday night? And you'd know exactly who the reference was. It was to Wolfowitz, it was to Pearl. So all the same folks, some of them who have deserted the sinking ship like proverbial rats, okay? But it was Feith, Wolfowitz, and the rest of them. They were the crazies.
There's a lot of other people that are have a dissenting opinion about this war, and has another view of this war other than Cindy Sheehan, and other people have lost sons in this war and daughters. She needs to really go home and do this little protest some other way besides trying to make things sound like she's the only voice of America.
3 weeks later, this gentleman and many others got their wish. Free speech was banned for hundreds of square miles around Bush's Crawford Ranch. Now you can only protest on private property or designated free speech zones where no one can even see your protest. Look, tourist stuff's popped up here now. Let freedom ring. We decided to cap off our day in Crawford by traveling down the public highway to where the Secret Service had blocked off the public road 2 miles before the entrance to Bush's ranch. We were promptly told, as if America is now a third world police state, to get out of there, despite the fact that we were credentialed press.
You need to get back in your car. You can't stand here.
Really?
Yeah, you have to get off the road.
Oh, we're off the road, okay. Or is it all right to stand over here?
Past your cars where you can stand.
Oh, but the barricades are here.
So let me get this straight. You believe that the U.S. government crashed those airplanes into the World Trade Center?
Yes, the evidence shows it.
You're full of Take a hike.
The whole point about 9/11 is that it gave a pretext for a preconceived plan. That plan is in the PNAC document, which precedes 9/11 by almost a year.
It became clear to us that the administration was using the corruption of intelligence to justify a war that need not happen.
In my opinion, when you look at the details of 9/11 and you read reports that there were planes that supposedly contained terrorists but did not take off that day, and that the Flight 93, for example, was supposed to be aimed at either Capitol Hill or the White House, you're in fact looking at a coup d'etat, that they wanted to destroy the infrastructure of American government.
There are a host of unanswered questions on all of this. The reason they're unanswered is because this president, this administration, will not answer the questions.
Why is it that perhaps the biggest question of all, why is it that after, on 9/11, 8:20 a.m., when it was undoubtedly without any question that one of those planes had been hijacked between 8:20 and 9:38 when the Pentagon was hit, an hour and 20 minutes. No US airplane was put into the air.
There were drills on the day of 9/11 in which the American Defense Forces were supposed to be dealing with mock hijackings. Obviously, those would have slowed down the response of national defense to the hijacked airliners. If American passenger jets go off course and they are tackled by American fighter jets, the default position is to shoot them down. And yet in this case, of course, none of that happened.
There was the Andrew Air Force Base 10 miles from Washington. It has a squadron of F-16 fighters. None of those was put into the air. This is absolutely almost incredible. The most powerful military technological country in the world, albeit under a terrifying attack, was not able to put planes into the air, which actually could probably have stopped at least the second and third hits.
And we've got to ask why George Bush sat there with a group of school children for 16 minutes after he'd been alerted to a plane going into the second tower.
The president's in Sarasota. He's told that the second plane has hit the World Trade Center. And the Secret Service guy immediately says, "We're out of here." The president stays for 30 minutes, folks, for 30 minutes. Now, how do you explain that? I've talked to all manner of Secret Service people. They say, "We're out of here" was exactly the right reaction. Everyone knew where the president was. If not the president, you might have had some concern for these little kids. Why did he stay for 30 minutes? Why was he countermanded?
The implication, of course, is he knew exactly what was going on, that he knew that he wasn't under attack.
I think all of this needs to be explained. It wasn't in the congressional report. There was no serious examination of this. And there is the amazing statement made in the official congressional report that the American authorities have not managed to trace the source of the funding. And then the most amazingly disingenuous statement, ultimately, is it of little consequence. It is of massive consequence. The head of Pakistani intelligence at the ISI, Lieutenant Mahmoud Ahmed, requested Omar Sheikh, who is a well-known Islamic extremist who is now actually in prison in Pakistan, to wire $100,000 to Mohammed Atta, who was the lead hijacker. It is absolutely astonishing that that lead has never been followed up. As it happened, General Mahmoud was actually on a visit to the United States, both before and just after 9/11, and saw many leading government officials.
For people to dismiss these questioners as conspiratorial advocates or conspiratorial theorists, that's completely out of line, because the questions remain because the president, who should be able to answer them, will not.
We have plenty of evidence that the attack on Afghanistan was planned. Because after the negotiations with the Taliban broke down in the United States, I think they went to Houston in Texas in about July, and there were later discussions at about this time in Berlin, where US officials made absolutely clear to the Taliban representatives in this famous phrase, either we will provide you with a carpet of gold, in other words, if you supply a pipeline across Afghanistan, you ensure the security of the country, you guard that pipeline, then we can do a deal with you, otherwise we will bury you in a carpet of bombs.
In the years since 9/11, scores of highly regarded individuals have gone public to express their serious doubts about 9/11. These include former presidential advisor and CIA analyst Ray McGovern, the father of Reaganomics and former Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Treasury, Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, BYU physics professor Stephen Jones, former German Defense Minister Andres von Bülow, former MI5 officer David Shaler, former Blair cabinet member Michael Meacher, former chief economist for the Department of Labor during President George W. Bush's first term, Dr. Morgan Reynolds, and many more. Out of the countless prominent personalities questioning the official 9/11 fable, Gore Vidal, award-winning author and historian, has raised some of the most important points. You spoke about some of your questions concerning 9/11 and how your father had helped write some of the rules for Intercept. Can you speak to your questions concerning 9/11, please?
Well, there was a big story about in the India Times which is a very good newspaper, and it was about 9/11. And we had just found out, the world had found out that Mohammed Atta, who was a Saudi Arabian guy, but seemingly working for Osama bin Laden, that he was in charge of the planes that crashed into the New York buildings. Well, the story is really more complicated. What struck me immediately, my father was director of air commerce under Franklin Roosevelt. My father, who was been one of the original Army Air Force flyers in World War I, he had put in a lot of sort of safety things. In the event of a hijacking of a passenger liner or any plane that they knew about, that fighter planes would be scrambled, that is, sent up into air immediately within minutes in order to force the plane down, to change course, shoot it down if you had to. And you don't need orders from the president, the vice president, or anybody else. That's the law. Well, they didn't go up after 9/11. Everybody knew what had happened, and the planes were still on their way to Washington to hit the Pentagon, when suddenly from Otis Air Base comes one fighter plane. Otis Air Base is in Massachusetts. Might just as well have been in Canada. That was the only fighter plane which, according to law, they all should have been up there, and not one went up. Well, that could only happen if somebody had told them to stand down, not to respond to what was, after all, their sworn duty. That's the Times of India broke the story, and then that well-known radical rag, the Wall Street Journal, also wrote about it. I thought by then places like the New York Times would have waked up, but the New York Times is incapable of waking up to anything important.
Months before 9/11, on June 1st, 2001, Dick Cheney ordered then Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld to issue this order to NORAD and the Pentagon. The document revoked their standing orders to shoot down errant or hijacked aircraft and instructed them to stand down until they were given orders by the President, Vice President, or Secretary of Defense. Then on 9/11, NORAD and the Pentagon waited for over an hour while the attacks were taking place for the orders to defend America that never came. Here is Transportation Secretary Norman Mineta testifying before the 9/11 Commission about an aide coming in to the Vice President on the morning of 9/11 as what was reported as Flight 77 was approaching the Pentagon. From the exchange, it is clear that Dick Cheney was ordering an ongoing stand down.
I wanted to focus just a moment on the Presidential Emergency Operating Center. You were there for a good part of the day. I think you were there with the Vice President. And we had that order given, I think it was by the President, that authorized the shooting down of commercial aircraft that were suspected to be controlled by terrorists. Were you there when that order was given?
No, I was not. I was made aware of it during the time that the airplane coming in to the Pentagon. There was a young man who would come in and say to the Vice President, the plane is 50 miles out. The plane is 30 miles out. And when it got down to the plane is 10 miles out, the young man also said to the Vice President, do the orders still stand? And the Vice President turned and whipped his neck around and said, of course the orders still stand. Have you heard anything to the contrary? Well, at the time I didn't know what all that meant. And
the flight you're referring to is the
flight that came into the Pentagon.
Vice President Dick Cheney had bound the hands of the military behind their backs, and he was refusing to cut them. On the 5th anniversary of the September 11th coup against America, thousands of citizens took to the streets of New York to expose the cover-up.
The people are sick and tired of the real perpetrators of 9/11 grandstanding like heroes and using the tragedy as a pretext to turn America into an Orwellian police state.
Once everybody gets here, we're going to all get together. We're going to go over to Ground Zero. We're here to get the information out. We're here to talk to the media. We're here to make sure that the official story continues to collapse. We're here to expose the terrorists, the people that really carried out 9/11, the criminals inside the military-industrial complex.
The vast majority of New York firefighters and police that we spoke with, off the record, said they knew that 9/11 was an inside job.
In 1933, Adolf Hitler staged a terror attack on the German Parliament building, the Reichstag, to blame it on their political enemies and set up a police state. Then Hitler, to launch World War II in 1939, launched an attack, a staged attack on the German military base outside Gleiwitz. This is mainstream news, totally released, classified. Hitler had his own military base attacked. You blame it on Poland to start World War III. You don't think the Germans just got up one morning and attacked Poland, do you? Adolf Hitler staged a fake attack on his own military base. That's how World War II started. And who do you think funded Adolf Hitler? Brown Brother Harriman, right up the street, was the main Nazi bank. That's right. George Bush, Senior's father, was the top U.S. Nazi agent in the United States. 9/11 is an inside job. It's a false flag terror operation. 9/11 was an inside job. 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 9/11 was an inside job.
One of the establishment's favorite tactics to counter 9/11 truth is to claim that it hurts the feelings of the victims of 9/11 and their families to bring up alternative theories. Bill Doyle is the head of the Coalition of 9/11 Families, the largest 9/11 victims organization. He reported to us that the majority of the members of his group believe that 9/11 is an inside job and that they're sick and tired of the massive concerted effort to cover up the truth by the controlled corporate press and the government. This is a very important point because the controlled media continues to claim that victims and their families don't want questions raised about 9/11. Every single 9/11 group we've talked to wants the investigation reopened and believes that there is a cover-up at the bare minimum. Bill Christensen was formerly the head of the CIA's Department of Foreign Threat Assessment. He has said that all the evidence points towards a total inside job. Former CIA clandestine case officer Robert Steele has gone on record saying there's enough evidence to indict Dick Cheney for involvement in 9/11.
In early June of 2006, we traveled to Chicago to meet with fellow 9/11 truth seekers and expose the official story as a fraud.
You cannot hide the truth. You will not hide the truth. It's coming out. Your crimes are coming out. Ladies and gentlemen, 9/11 is an inside job. It's a self-inflicted war. It's a government false flag terror operation. are waking up every single day. More people realize what the stakes are. They love their families, and they understand that the government is carrying out terrorist attacks as a pretext to re-engineer America into a police state. Why? To capture us to be their political slaves, to use us as an engine of global empire, to invade the planet.
While in Chicago, we had a chance to again speak with former MI5 agent Andy Michon.
I'm convinced that 9/11 was an inside job. And there are a number of compelling reasons why I think it was an inside job. Primarily, the collapse of the Twin Towers, which look to me to be controlled demolitions. Also the collapse of Building 7 of the World Trade Center complex. Also the fact that the air defences were stood down that day. Who benefited from the attacks, of course. So there were a lot of put options put on the airlines that suffered during those attacks. It's a whole range of different evidence that adds up to something very, very suspicious about 9/11. I feel passionately that we need to expose the government involvement in 9/11, because if we don't, they will keep doing this in future. There will be another attack in order to justify another unjustifiable war.
We also spoke with Dr. Morgan Reynolds.
No matter how much our inert public wants to avoid this, it's eating away. It's willful denial, willful ignorance. It's eating away at the underbelly of America. And we aren't going to solve our problems by ignoring 9/11. The biggest smoking gun then and now is WTC-7. How can anyone watch it without some kind of a psyop or verbiage accompanying it and not look at that and say, hey, that building was just demolished, just the way the Las Vegas Sands was, or the Seattle Stadium, etc. Just there's no way around that. Here we are in so-called broad daylight. It's 5:20 p.m. and we've got cameras on it. And what other explanation can there be for this very conventional-looking collapse when under 7 seconds? That just has crime, inside job written all over it. We need real convictions. We need arrests. We need prosecutions.
We spoke with former Minnesota Governor Jesse Ventura to get his perspective on 9/11. Ventura has told the press that he is so concerned about the attack on the Bill of Rights in this country that he has now moved to Mexico and believes the country is sliding into full-bore fascism. I would just like to get your view, your take on 9/11, Gulf of Tonkin, JFK, all of it.
Well, I think the most interesting thing to talk about today is, if people aren't aware, that due to the Freedom of Information Act, in the early 60s, the Pentagon had an operation called Operation Northwoods, and it never came to reality, but it was on the table, that our military would attack certain cities within the United States and make it look like Cuba did it to justify an invasion of Cuba. It never happened, but just the simple fact that they contemplated it and it was actually on the table in the Pentagon, I find that just very disturbing, that they would, even consider using our military to try to justify an invasion of another country.
You did speak on Jay Leno, according to my recollection, about how Gulf of Tonkin was staged, how you were lied to, we were lied to, you lost a lot of friends. What was it like to learn that they had staged an event that didn't really happen to bring us into full-scale war in '64? What was it like when you realized that and you learned that?
Well, it was very disappointing to believe in your country that they would lie to you to get into a war, that they would perpetrate a lie and that the media would go along with it. It's a real eye-opener, and you realize that if they would do it in the 60s, they'll do it again. If it works once, it'll work again. Government very much operates that way, and I really learned about it when McNamara did his tour with the film, and he came to Harvard when I was teaching there, and they pretty much had to lock me up in a room so that I wouldn't confront him. And
what would you say to him if you were in a room with him?
I would ask him why we were lied to and what the purpose was for it. The one thing I do question on 9/11 is the fact that if anyone's familiar with the Payne Stewart, the golfer, and when he died, He was flying in a private plane, and they lost contact with that private plane out of Florida, and within 30 minutes they had a fighter jet up on the wing. And that fighter stayed with it all the way till it crashed, making sure that it didn't harm anyone. And the thing I questioned on 9/11 was simply the fact, where were our planes? When all of this was going on and planes were being hijacked an hour apart, and there were 4 of them to cover about a 6-hour space, at no time, to my knowledge, did we have any fighter planes up in the air. Why?
Well, the default position is to send up fighters.
Right. Why weren't they? In light of the fact that there was a cover-up that got us into the Vietnam War, and there was, in my opinion, a cover-up of John Kennedy's assassination, I would just say that I don't believe it's beyond reason to not at least consider that the government certainly would do things like that.
Then in mid-March of 2006, actor Charlie Sheen went public on my syndicated radio show and simply called for a new independent investigation and questioned the official story. Sheen knew that the establishment lapdogs would attack his personal past, whether real or manufactured, instead of challenging him on the facts. So Charles Sheen preemptively challenged them to challenge him on the facts, something they steadfastly refused to do. Literally hundreds of vicious hit pieces were written in newspapers worldwide. Every old rumor was dredged up and thrown at Sheen, and a fresh raft of allegations was launched at him. The only national television program that was fair in its presentation was Showbiz Tonight with A.J. Hammer on CNN.
On Showbiz Tonight, Charlie Sheen speaks out on a controversial theory that the government covered up what really happened on 9/11.
Taking over 4 commercial airliners and hitting 75% of their targets, that feels like a conspiracy theory.
Tonight, we dig even deeper. The host of the radio show on which Sheen leveled his startling allegations joins us live right here on Showbiz Tonight. The radio host who interviewed Sheen is Alex Jones of the Genesis Communications Network. Alex joins me live from Austin, Texas to talk about Sheen's riveting comments. Alex, as I mentioned, the response that we got from doing this story last night, absolutely shocking. So I want to know how it actually all came about. How did the interview with Charlie Sheen actually happen? Did you guys reach out to him? Did he call you? What was the deal?
Well, just to make something clear, Mr. Sheen has amazing courage to do what he's done, and he contacted me. He's been watching my documentaries for years. He's one of the most informed people that I've talked to in Hollywood on this subject. Listen, for years, Hollywood's been on fire with people knowing the truth about 9/11, and I was the first to expose 9/11 on the day. In fact, 2 months before, I had intel that elements of the military-industrial complex were going to carry out the attack. I said they'll use bin Laden, the known CIA asset, as their patsy to take the blame for attacking the towers. So Mr. Sheen is only exceptional in that he has courage in going public, courage that no one else in Hollywood had. I mean, here's a CNN poll from Anderson Cooper a year and a half ago where they said, is the government covering up 9/11? Could they be involved? 90% when the poll closed on CNN said this. So listen, I have my own syndicated show. I've done 4,000 radio interviews in the last 4.5 years. Almost no one calls in and disagrees now. We have the majority view and we have the evidence. And bottom line, there are declassified U.S. government documents like Operation Northwoods that ABC News reported on back in 2000. Operation Northwoods, Google it, and in there the U.S. government, an element of it said we want to hijack jets by remote control, crash them, and blame it on the Soviet Union and Cuba. Now, that was decades ago. This is why we believe this. Right. Then you look at the official story, the firefighters, the police, hundreds of them saying there were bombs in the buildings. They were told to shut up. You look at Building 7, detonators are going off. You can see the explosions.
And Alex, a lot of this is what Charlie Sheen was covering. I'm actually just curious, did he reach out to you guys? Is he the one who put the call into you?
Sure,
is that how he wound up on your show?
Sure, he called me a few weeks ago and said that he loves this country. He has nothing to gain from this. I mean, in fact, it's dangerous for him to do. But he said, I love this country and my kids so much that I'm going to do this, Alex. And I said, God bless you, because now it may spur other Hollywood people who've got major pull, who know the truth, to start going public. Look, it's really simple. Let's understand this, okay? 9/11 was an inside job. It was a self-inflicted wound, and what Charlie Sheen is doing is just amazing, and he can only be commended for it, and all he's calling for is a real investigation. I go further at Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. We lay out how it happened, what took place, and it's not just Charlie Sheen. I've interviewed, CNN has interviewed some of these people, the only network that I've seen doing it. You guys have interviewed. There have been physics professors that have gone public. There have been the heads of mining colleges that have gone public.
George Bush Sr.'s top CIA advisor who briefed him and briefed Ronald Reagan, one of the highest level guys at the CIA, says our government is clearly involved in carrying out terror to blame it on foreign enemies. Did you know that on CIA.gov, they admit that they carried out terror attacks in 1953 to blame it on Mohammad Mossadegh in Iran as a pretext to overthrow Iran?
I'm all good stuff and all stuff that needs to be talked about. But the question is why? Why have so many of the major media outlets not talked about these alternative theories that exist behind 9/11? Why is that?
Mark Twain said that in the beginning, a patriot is a scarce man, hated and feared and scorned. But in time, when his cause succeeds, the timid join him, because then it costs nothing to be a patriot. A lot of people don't have the courage that you have, AJ. A lot of people don't have the courage of Charlie Sheen. They don't have the courage of the German defense minister, Andres von Bülow,
What do you think
2 years ago
What do you think they're afraid of that's going to happen to them?
They're afraid of being beaten up by the hordes of neocon intimidators who try to go out there with their Gestapo Nazi tactics to try to bludgeon everybody with their blogs and radio shows to shut up. But they've lost power because people have learned that they're a bunch of liars. They lied about the WMDs. They've lied about everything, and now their credibility is totally blown. The new White House memo just came out where Bush was talking about staging the shoot down of American planes to blame it on Saddam. That's public. That's admitted.
We have been getting an overwhelming response to our Showbiz Tonight question of the day. Charlie Sheen speaks out. Do you agree with his assertion that there is a government cover-up of 9/11? Let's take a look at how the vote is going so far. 82% of you say yes. Only 18% of you say no.
I had a sense that this thing was going to get hot. I didn't realize that, as you say, it was going to go supernova. That if they continue to attack me personally, it only gives credence to our side of the argument. People want the truth. They want the truth. And what's been offered to us resembles nothing of the sort.
He says is, don't believe me, check out the facts. Go look at the evidence. Don't believe the attack dogs. It isn't about Charlie Sheen or Alex Jones or AJ Hammer. Right. It's about NORAD standing down. It's about bombs in the buildings. It's about Pentagon documents saying they wanted to carry out these attacks and blame it on foreign enemies. This is all public. That's why all these physicists and politicians and people and congresswomen, ideas are bulletproof. And the New World Order better stop carrying out terror attacks. We've caught them over 200 times in the last 100 years. Western governments doing this. Hitler does it, the British do it, the Russians did it. Governments do this. And I'm not saying the whole government. Very small criminal black world is what they're called, operators are carrying this out. That's the facts. Please go investigate it, ladies and gentlemen. You will discover the truth. Look at America. It's turning into a police state. We're putting cameras in school bathrooms. Nothing can stop the truth from coming out on 9/11, and we're in danger of the New World Order carrying out more terror attacks to keep this war for empire.
Charlie Sheen then appeared on Jimmy Kimmel Live. Sheen again threw down the gauntlet and challenged his detractors to look at the facts of Building 7 and the 5 frames from the Pentagon.
You know him from movies like Platoon and Wall Street, and in addition to seeing him every week on 2.5 Men, opening tonight, you can see him in Scary Movie 4. Please welcome the indestructible Charlie Sheen. Almost Easter.
Hey, back at you. Thank you.
You had some interesting comments. You were on a radio show and you talked about 9/11, and you have is it a theory, or you just don't believe the government account of what happened on 9/11?
I just had questions.
Yeah?
I had a lot of questions, and the forum I chose to voice those questions in is the Alex Jones radio show, and just because he's a guy that I've been a fan of and followed for a lot of years, and you know, I got attacked. I mean, there were a lot of hit pieces. The reaction was
people get
severe.
very mad when celebrities have opinions.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
I understand. I know he's not qualified. He doesn't. You know, he's just who the hell is he to have an opinion about something so horrible? And you know, it was sad because they didn't really take a look at any of the stuff I was asking them to look at, any of the evidence or any of the stuff that generated those questions. You know, and they said, oh, he's another tinfoil hat wearing Hollywood clown. You know, and it's like the only. You know, I felt that the only real validation I needed was just being a tax-paying American that loves my country.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just something that you wonder about, and you would like to know more about,
Sure.
I assume. And do you did you study the tapes? And
I've done a lot of research, and it's not just me, it's the people that have come before me, the experts and the engineers and the physicists and the scientists and the scholars that raised a lot of these things. And I took a look at their research and said, yeah, it doesn't add up. A lot of it doesn't add up, hence these questions, you know. And there's two areas. There's Building 7, and there's the 5 frames from the Pentagon. Don't listen to me. Do your own research, you know. But I think that, you know, what happened to a time in this country when we were entitled, when we had a constitutional and a God-given right to be curious about things that didn't make sense. That's all it was.
Because we have a lot of cable shows now, and they need stuff to be mad about. So, you know, stuff like this is like, oh boy, we could yell about this for an entire week. And plus, with your dad being the president and all, it puts a lot of the focus on it.
That's true. Yeah, I should have conferred with him before I came out publicly. You know?
Within weeks of Charlie Sheen throwing down the gauntlet on national television, the federal government released 2 new videos, almost identical to frames released 4 years before by the Pentagon.
We've got to ask questions about why the Pentagon could be attacked. This is supposed to be the most defended building in the world. We've got to look at the stills that were released from video footage of that day, which claim that a jetliner went into the side of the Pentagon and yet appear to show some kind of guided missile going in there.
The establishment press chortled with glee, as if the new footage conclusively proved their claims.
Tonight's other big story, the Pentagon releasing the first video showing American Airlines Flight 77 crashing into the Pentagon on September 11th. Well, that's a question. Does this prove once and for all that is where that airplane crashed?
Well, I would have thought that over the years that was never a question, but some folks had a question about that. I think that question is now once and for all answered.
Since the first days of 9/11, the establishment press has only focused on the Pentagon controversy and not the hundreds of other smoking guns and serious questions that have been raised. We have to ask ourselves, why? As if it was by design, the new frames only intensified the debate. No passenger plane is evident in the still frames. They're more than happy to endlessly focus on the Pentagon, but they won't touch Building 7.
It's amazing.
Amazing, incredible, pick your word. For the 3rd time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
We have the owner of the World Trade Center complex admitting on tape that he ordered the building demolished on the afternoon of 9/11.
I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
During our on-the-ground investigations in New York City over the last 5+ years, we've talked to scores of eyewitnesses who had claimed that police and firemen told them to get back from Building 7 because it was going to be brought down or, quote, explode.
Building 7, while I was listening to live feed from our local public radio station later in the afternoon, they talked about Building 7. Building 7 was fine. There was no airplane that hit it. And then they even began to ruminate on the air about demolishing the building. I said, well, I don't know. I mean, you can put out fires. You know, why would you talk about demolishing a building that, you know, it wasn't hit by anything? You know, the fires weren't bad or anything like that.
I will say that I spoke to a cop on 9/11 who said that it was going to come down. I don't know how he knew that.
Now, archived CNN footage has surfaced showing video footage of a New York City police officer telling cameramen and civilians to get back from Building 7 because the building was going to blow up.
Keep your eye on that building. It'll be coming down. The building is about to blow up. Moving back. All right, guys? Sorry. We are looking back. There's a building. It's about to blow up. On flame. Debris coming down.
Just in the last few seconds, another building, building number 7, one of the buildings in support of the World Trade Center towers, has collapsed. This is no small building, as you can see, at 47 stories. It would stand out in most American cities.
And then, in late February of 2007, 9/11 researchers reviewing archives of live news coverage from September 11th discovered to their shock that BBC World had reported that Building 7, also known as the Salomon Brothers building, had completely collapsed over 20 minutes before its actual implosion. First anchors at the London news desk reported it.
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York. You might have heard a few moments ago I was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing, and indeed it has. Apparently that's only a few hundred yards away from where the...
They then cut to BBC reporter Jane Stanley in New York, who also reported that the Salomon Brothers building had fallen, all the while with the building clearly visible behind her through the window.
Our correspondent, Jane Stanley. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know. Details are very, very sketchy. There's almost a sense downtown in New York behind me, down by the World Trade Centers, of just an area completely closed off as the rescue workers try to do their job. But this isn't the first building that has suffered as a result. We know that part of the Marriott Hotel next to the World Trade Center also collapsed as a result of this huge amount of falling debris from 110 floors of the two twin towers of the World Trade Center. As you can see behind me, the Trade Center appears to be still burning. We see these huge clouds of smoke and ash, and we know that behind that there's an empty piece of what was a very familiar New York skyline.
Another BBC News channel, BBC 24, also got the word and reported the collapse 20 minutes before it fell.
Enormous building in New York has collapsed. It is the 47-story Salomon Brothers building, which was situated very close to the World Trade Center, right there in this financial capital.
It then emerged that Aaron Brown of CNN reported from a rooftop overlooking Ground Zero that Building 7 had collapsed over an hour before it actually fell.
We are getting information now that one of the other buildings, Building 7 in the World Trade Center complex, is on fire and has either collapsed or is collapsing. And you, to be honest, can see these pictures a little bit more clearly than I, but building number 7, one of the buildings in this very large complex of buildings that is the Trade Center, there were, and that is the right way to put it, there were the two towers, but then there are a number of support buildings around it, and now we are told that there's a fire there, and that building may collapse as well, as you can see. We can see, as we look now back downtown, we can see the billowing smoke.
CNN and BBC's reports conclusively prove media prior knowledge and false start scripting of Building 7's controlled demolition. Couple that with hundreds of police, firefighters, and rescue workers stating that they were told to get back from 7 because it was going to be brought down. There can be no doubt that Building 7's destruction was an orchestrated inside job. 9/11 was just one salvo in an ongoing war against the free peoples of the planet. It's all part of their terror storm. Pentagon war planners now publicly admit that 90% of their battle plans are psychological versus physical. The information war has taken the place of aircraft carriers, fighter bombers, and Abrams M1A tanks. And you, the population of the planet, are the target. Put simply, modern warfare is all about selling the population to love its own enslavement. The elite are waging war on the people. Edward L. Bernays is regarded by many as the father of public relations. He was born in Vienna, Austria. Bernays was the nephew of Sigmund Freud. Bernays pioneered the use of psychology and other social sciences to design public persuasion campaigns. He published several scholarly works still used in universities worldwide today.
On page 71 of his book Propaganda, Bernays wrote, "If we understand the mechanisms and motives of the group mind, is it not possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will without their knowing about it?" Bernays literally wrote the book on modern propaganda. His clients included Procter & Gamble, CBS Television, the United Fruit Company, the American Tobacco Company, General Electric, Dodge Motors, and he also spearheaded the national campaign to fluoridate the water supply of America through the fluoridationist of the Public Health Service. He was hired by multiple presidents to engage in propaganda campaigns against the American people, as well as the U.S. Army. Another quote from his book Propaganda: "The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our government. We are governed, our minds are molded, our taste formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of." Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels publicly praised Bernays on many occasions and stated that Bernays' work was the blueprint used by the Nazis to seize control of the Reich. Edward Bernays advanced the science of propaganda light years. But more than 60 years after his heyday, the science of mind control is thousands of times more sophisticated than even Bernays had envisioned. Since the dawn of man, bullies have attempted to dominate and control the tribe. Human history has been one long struggle of the independent free human against organized crime syndicates attempting to enslave him. Brute force has been replaced with intimidation and propaganda. We are manipulated into enslaving ourselves. We are conned into believing that the establishment is our loving keeper and not our parasitic master. The New World Order architects are a group of predatory control freaks who have enslaved humanity and are desperate to keep control of their cattle. The elite is threatened by independent free humans who control their own destinies. They're threatened by intelligence, by beauty, by honor, by family. They seek to control and steer the destiny of humanity in a direction that secures their power monopoly forever. They are sadistic, they are callous, they think nothing of human life, only control and keeping that control. The entire world is being engineered, designed to be a prison planet, a control grid over free humanity, where no dissent is tolerated. Once you realize that the establishment is laughing at you, you can begin to research the truth and start fighting back. Once you understand their game plan, it's very easy to defeat. Knowing who your enemy is half the battle. Taking action is the other half. You only have to free your mind, and defeating the globalist will be easy.